welcome back to Rowing with the Homies. It's Finlos, and thanks for coming back. So obviously I haven't been here for a while. It's been about a month since the last episode of Rowing with the Homies. Mostly because I've been out of town, a couple weeks for work, and then a week on vacation. So I have to say that I am glad to be back home, glad to be getting back into the routine, and glad to be getting back into having these conversations. It has been definitely something that I've missed, an important part of a daily routine that has left me feeling at times dysregulated because the physical activity has been diminished, but also just it has this is a really valuable and important way that I metabolize is a good way. It's a term that Eva and I like to use as we discuss how our bodies and our minds deal with the daily occurrences that we have to go through. So thank you for rejoining me now. And if you are here for the first time, then welcome. I hope that you are able to get some movement today, to find your rhythm, to find your focus, and to find some space and time to care for yourself. Rowing with the Homies is where we connect what's happening out there in the world, whether it's news, philosophical questions, or just some piece of media that makes us think, with what's happening right here inside ourselves, in our bodies and in our minds, in our experiences. It's about finding the link between the external landscape and our internal one. And I guess just to start off, what's been on my mind is just thinking about the immense scale, really a renewed appreciation for just how big the United States really is. And this is particularly pertinent as we were vacationing in Portland, Maine, and we flew just because it's a really long distance. But I guess something that I wasn't really quite aware of is how few flights go in and out of Portland International Jetway. And last weekend, a major thunderstorm basically grounded at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, which is where all of the connecting flights that would go to Portland were coming out of. And because those flights were canceled, our flight was canceled. And basically, Delta's online interface, their telephone-based support, everything was just overwhelmed. And we were unable to find a way to get home through by airplane. And it was a little bit frustrating, obviously, because vacation was good, and we were anxious and ready to be home. And as we were preparing to leave to come home and packing everything up, we get the message from the airline that our flight had been canceled. And generally speaking, this isn't usually more than a minor inconvenience. You know, your app will automatically connect you to the next flight, or you'll have to call and talk to somebody, but there were just no flights. And we checked an hour and a half south in Logan, airport in Boston, up in Bangor, and there was just nothing for a couple of days. So we did what we had to do, and we rented a car, and we drove home. And let me tell you, that's just the East Coast, from Portland all the way down to where we are here in Tallahassee. It was a 22-hour drive straight through. We stopped here and there for snacks and restroom, and there was one point at about from 4 to 5 in the morning where we stopped just to like power nap, but essentially we drove straight through. And it sounds crazy, and it is kind of crazy, but the funny thing is we arrived home in that time faster than if we had got the next available potential connecting flight. We would have beaten that time by about 12 or 16 hours or something like that. So there would have been a whole lot of waiting, some layovers, some uncomfortable nights in terminals, and instead we turned it into a family road trip. And it's not the same thing as when you plan to do it, of course, but it was a drive, and we got to see parts of the country that we've never seen before, even if it was fleeting. And while that journey in and of itself, that adventure, is worthy of a full conversation, what I'm thinking of as I've gotten home and I've digested what that drive was like, you can think about it in the abstract, about how big the United States is relative to most countries in the world. But that drive in and of itself was about 1,500 miles. To make a comparison, that's like the distance from London to Moscow. And we drove it in less than a day. And when you cover that much ground, seeing the diversity of the country, it really hits you in a different kind of way. Just to begin, the physical landscape, the flora and the fauna. Starting in coastal Maine, we had the rocky shores and dense pine forests and cool air. I mean, Eva and I and the kids really, really enjoyed that change. Where we got there and it was 95 degrees, but 2 days later, we were waking up in the upper 50s and landing at about 70 degrees in the afternoon. And it was gorgeous. But then by the time we got home, we're back to the muggy, humid South. But it's an interesting experience to see the trees change from the hardwoods and evergreens in the north to the palmettos and live oaks in the south. And the shifting of the wildlife from moose and bears in the colder climates to alligators and armadillos in the warmer ones. It's a really interesting experience. An interesting, and I'll say ultimately pleasant, reminder of the variability, the microclimates and macro systems that dictate our daily experiences across the continent. You can go from a thunderstorm or tornado warning in one state to a frost advisory in another, and have sunshine just hours away. The atmospheric and geographic diversity really is profound, but it's also a stark illustration of how different life can be just a few hundred miles down the road. But this physical vastness and variety extend beyond the natural world. It mirrors the incredible diversity of the people and cultures that inhabit this country. As we drove through the different states, we heard different accents, we saw different types of architecture, we passed through towns with unique histories and economies. The pace of life shifts from place to place. The local news stations highlight completely different concerns. We can observe various political leanings, different values, distinct regional traditions, and even subtle shifts in how people interact. They're not necessarily reflective of the true human behaviors present, but they are reflections of deeply ingrained cultural patterns shaped by generations of history and migration and local circumstances. And here's where this vastness, this kaleidoscope of geographies and cultures becomes relevant to something on my mind. And that's the challenge of governing such a diverse country. The very things that makes the United States unique and vibrant, its immense size, its varied climates, its, I guess, quote, melting pot of ethnicities and backgrounds, also make it extraordinarily difficult to govern effectively. A policy that makes perfect sense for a bustling city on the West Coast might be completely irrelevant or even detrimental to a rural farming community in the Midwest. Environmental regulations designed for the Great Lakes region won't necessarily apply to the desert Southwest. And crucially, the deeply held values and priorities of people in one part of the country can be fundamentally different from those in another. And this geographical and cultural fragmentation means that finding common ground, forging consensus, and creating policies that serve everyone becomes an immense undertaking. It's not just about differing opinions, it's about fundamentally different ways of life, different economic realities, and different historical narratives that have shaped distinct regional identities. A critical part of understanding these divides is acknowledging their historical roots, how colonial ideologies were overlaid upon and actively displaced the vast array of indigenous cultures that thrived across this continent for millennia. These foundational acts of conquest and suppression created deep, unresolved rifts in the very fabric of the nation, whose echoes we still feel today. Further, the abhorrent practice of chattel slavery created a forced mixing of cultures. European, various African ethnicities, and indigenous peoples, but without ever accounting for the immense generational harm that was done. And instead of a natural, respectful, cultural exchange, it created deep, enduring systems of oppression and economic disparity that continued to shape our social and political landscape. The legacies of these historical injustices, the unacknowledged trauma, the systemic disadvantages, the persistent stereotypes, are deeply embedded in our regional differences and continue to fuel much of the political turmoil we've been experiencing. The deep partisan divides often fall along these geographical, cultural, and historical lines. Issues like gun control, immigration, climate change, and even basic concepts of freedom and individual responsibility are viewed through dramatically different lenses depending on where you are in this country and what colonial and post-slavery traditions have historically shaped that region. Our federal system, designed to allow for some regional autonomy, is constantly grappling with the tension between national unity and local self-determination. The sheer breadth of the American experiment means that governing isn't just about crafting laws. It's about continuously negotiating the very meaning of what it means to be American across countless disparate and often historically wounded experiences. And this inherent vastness, this constant state of flux and difference, it really gets me thinking. The cross-country drive wasn't just about external landscapes. It sparked a profound reflection on our internal ones as well. Just as the United States is a vast and diverse continent full of shifting terrains, weather patterns, and cultures, so too are we as individuals. We are not monolithic beings. We contain multitudes, and recognizing and embracing this internal multiplicity, this vastness within, can be incredibly powerful. Think about the different versions of ourselves that emerge in different situations. The professional version, the relaxed homebody, the passionate advocate, the playful friend, the thoughtful parent or partner. Each of these selves or identities has its own flora of thoughts, its own fauna of emotions, its own weather pattern of moods. Just like driving from Maine to Florida, our internal landscape shifts and changes depending on the environment we're in, and sometimes even just the time of day or the season of life. It gets me thinking about the pressure we often feel to be consistently one way, to present a seamless, unchanging self to the world. Sometimes we might strive for a perpetual sunny disposition, or an unwavering sense of confidence, or an unyielding productivity. But just like the weather across America, our internal climate is variable. We will have our calm, clear days, our stormy periods, our stretches of intense heat, and our moments of quiet, reflective coolness. Trying to suppress these natural fluctuations, trying to force ourselves to be something we're not in a given moment, can lead to internal stress, like trying to grow palm trees in Maine's winter. Embracing our internal multiplicity means acknowledging that it's okay to feel different things at different times. It's okay to be energetic one day and exhausted the next, and it's okay to be extroverted in one social setting and introverted in another. It's about recognizing that these shifts aren't weaknesses, but rather the natural expression of complex, adaptive human beings. It's the equivalent of appreciating the beauty of both the Appalachian Mountains and the Florida Keys. Each valuable, each beautiful in its own right, and each contributing to the richness of the whole. This also applies to our beliefs and perspectives. Just as there are diverse cultural viewpoints across the USA, we too hold a range of perspectives within ourselves. We might have conflicting ideas, evolving opinions, or even different voices in our heads debating a decision. And instead of viewing this as internal conflict to be eradicated, what if we saw it as a rich internal dialogue, a congress of ideas that helps us navigate the complexities of life? What if we allowed for the possibility that our truth today might evolve tomorrow, just as the political climate or social norms of a region can shift over time? So in a way, this cross-country journey became a metaphor for trying to accept and trying to celebrate the variability that I experience within myself. Letting go of rigid expectations of who I am, and instead leaning into the dynamic, evolving, complex idea of who I can be. Because when we resist our own internal weather patterns or deny the existence of different internal regions, that's often where the friction and discomfort arise. And that leads me into the final segment. And today, depression feels like. And to round this off, to close off the conversation of this drive that we took, there was a moment in the long day and long night that was that drive. There was a period after we stopped to have our very short, brief power nap, and we were back on the road again at about 4:30. There was that period just before sunrise, and it feels like the longest hour of the night when you're actually waiting for the sun to rise, and it just seems like it won't come. And today for me, depression feels like that longest hour. Not the dramatic darkness of midnight or the sometimes struggle and sleepiness of the early evening. Instead, it's the quiet, almost imperceptible period when the night is at its deepest and you know the sun is coming, but it hasn't broken the horizon yet. It's that waiting. And if you think about it, that last hour right before dawn, the world is at its stillest. The sounds of the night have faded, and the sounds of the day haven't yet begun. There's a peculiar kind of chill that sets in, a stillness that sometimes feels isolating. I'm awake, acutely aware of the second by second passage of time, and yet feeling like there is no movement at all. There's an almost imperceptible shift in the quality of light that lets you know the sun will be coming soon, but it's not enough to really call it sunrise yet. You know intellectually that the day will break, but in that moment, that waiting feels endless. It's yearning for a shift. And a lot of times this is how depression can feel. It's not a dramatic storm or a crushing weight. It's just a waiting for energy to return, waiting for the moments of joy, waiting for motivation to spark some action. It's the feeling of knowing that things are going to change, but knowing does not change the powerlessness to make that change begin, or at least to perceive it. In that state of waiting, the internal multiplicity we were talking about earlier seems to shrink. All the different versions of myself, all the varied internal landscapes flatten out into this one monotonous state of waiting, quiet anticipation. It's as if the internal me has paused. It's a holding of breath. It's not a fight against those internal things. It's just a moment of waiting. It's the absence of motion. So today, depression feels like that longest hour. The quiet enduring. It's a reminder that sometimes healing and growth isn't about grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs, but about the quiet perseverance through that pre-dawn silence, and trusting that however slow, the sun will eventually rise. And we're all navigating currents, both internal and external, and finding our rhythm in the process. This recent drive reminded me of the incredible vastness and diversity of our external world and how that mirrors the rich, complex, and often shifting internal landscapes we each inhabit. If any of what we discussed today resonated with you, whether it's the awe of geographical scale, the challenge of embracing your own internal multiplicity, or particularly if you're struggling with the longest hour of the night that depression can bring, please know with absolute certainty that you are not alone. These experiences are part of your journey. Your feelings are real and they matter. If you need more support, if these feelings are impacting your life, please consider seeking professional help. Therapists, counselors, and mental health professionals are equipped to provide support and strategies to help you navigate these challenges. We're in this together, finding our rhythm and figuring out how to make it through. Recognizing the currents is an important part of finding a smoother path ahead. As always, I deeply value your time, your attention, and your willingness to engage with these topics with me. Please reach out if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for the show. You can send me an email to finlos@finloslives.com. Find me on social media, or check out the website finloslives.com. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you found today's conversation valuable, I would be incredibly grateful if you'd consider sharing the show with anyone in your network who might also find it helpful or interesting. Thank you again for being with me today. Let's keep moving, keep thinking, and I look forward to our next conversation.